all the systems and rules that held your country together fell apart suddenly, and your family members were every one of them, in a dangerous situation. This is a quote written by W. Harry. This quote comes from the book The Translator. W. Harry lived in a small village with his brothers, sisters, and parents. After the Sudanese government sent soldiers to his village looking for rebels, at the age of 13, his family sent him to El Fisher to finish school. While working in Libya and Egypt, he learned English and Arabic. This allowed him to be a translator for the UN and US-backed efforts to determine if what was going on in Darfur was a genocide. Sudan's government didn't allow any journalists into the Darfur region. Sudanese citizens who took reporters into the Darfur region, such as Dayoud, were at risk of being arrested, imprisoned, executed for treason. The translator, a tribesman memorial of Darfur, in the book The Translator Dayoud, writes about his many journeys of taking journalists into the heart of Darfur crisis. One ordeal he talked about was his drive by island. An American reporter named Paul Sade, and Dayoud was captured by the Sudanese army in August 2006. They were held for a month where they were beaten and deprived. After pressure from the American government, Bono, the Pope Benedict, and other world leaders, they were let go. Harry soon moved to the United States. His main focus of the book was and continued to educate the world about what was going on in Sudan, especially in the Darfur region. Before I discuss the turbulent history, I will provide with the demographics of Sudan, which will help you understand the history. Prior to 2011, the largest country on the African continent. The population was approximately 45 million. The religion consists of Sunni Muslim, which made up 70%, Christians made up 20%, and traditional religion was another 10%. 114 languages were spoken in South Sudan alone. Sudan is home to many ethnic tribes, but I am going to focus on the Dinka, Nura, Fur, and the Zajuli. Okay. When you force people of different ethnic groups to live together, nothing good come out of it. The Second Sudanese War began in 1982 when the then president began redeploying southern troops to the north, which violates the Addis Ababa Agreement, which was signed in 1972 after the First Sudanese War. June 5th, 1983, President Numeri established the Republican Order Number 1, which entitled divided the South Sudan into 3 provinces with separate capitals. It replaced the Regional Assembly of Juba with 3 much weaker legislative bodies. It eliminated the separate Southern Army in the South and eliminated the representation in the Sudanese Armed Forces. In September 1983, the Sudanese national government established a Sade law on all people in province of Sudan. John Gingrich was a very important figure to the rebel movement of South Sudan. He fought in the First Sudanese Civil War, but because of his age, he was encouraged to get his education. He received a bachelor in economics from Burnell College in Iowa and a doctorate from Iowa State University. He liked how the United States government was ran and wanted to bring back to Sudan. He attended the Addis peace negotiation. He disliked the process, especially the mistakes the South was making, and vowed to avoid them in future negotiations. One mistake he noticed from the First Sudanese was ongoing division between the military and political wings. He bridged all 3 divisions. In January 1983, orders from the government for Southern troops to move north. Gingrich and his commanders refused to comply. In May 1983, the SAF was sent in to stop the uprising. Major Kribino Kanye, commander of the 105th Battalion, fired the first shot and pushed back the SAF. Kribino reform and progressive Sudan, equal democracy for all, and liberation of the entire country. Although the violation of the Addis Peace Agreement was the driving force behind the Second Sudanese Civil War, the humanitarian crisis of 1988 was the first straw. The humanitarian crisis of 1988 to 1999 began after a 3-year drought and famine, a 14-hour period of rain inundated Khartoum and the cattle herding south. Flood led to cattle disease with the great majority of the cattle. Everyone went without food. 70% of their calories came from cows. Families turned to traditional methods to survive. They would marry their daughters off and receive dowry from the boy's family using 150 cows. To reduce the amount of mouths they had to feed, they would send boys off to defend themselves. Refugee camps were set up after the UN realized that the boys between the age of 6 and 18 would die in large quantities from the famine, but the refugee camps became recruiting grounds for the SPLA. As the famine increased, the UNIC, the UNICEF, Red Cross, the NGs, and European aid agencies, and USAID tried offering humanitarian assistance. Sade government refused assistance because he believed he could break the English movement by preventing food deliveries to the south. Sadiq and later the Bashar government used displacement, disease, and starvation as a weapon of war to kill off the southern population. He ordered the Maryland militia to burn every Dinka village to the ground, raping or kidnapping their women and children, raiding their livestock and murdering their men. If people did survive, they would flee without food and water and would die in the countryside. 1.3 million southern Sudanese died between 1983 and 1993. The government used Dinka rivals to attack the SPLA. Equipment found in as many as 70 tribes to attack the SPLA. Dinka and the Nur killed each other and burned each other's villages using northern weapons and equipment. Many people do not know or understand the involvement of Chinese government in the killings of millions. In 1969 to 1985, the Sudanese government was buying weapons from the Chinese government. The purchase increased in 1990 due to the internal civil war along with Sudanese promises China international credit derived for its oil potential. Since 1995, China has provided the South Sudanese government with ammunition, tanks, helicopters, and fighter aircraft. These weapons were used to kill millions and die for. Not only did China willingly provide guns so that the government can massacre their own people, but participate in stealing oil from the South Sudan. The motivation for arms trade appears to be primarily economic. China surpassed their peak oil production, relied on its northeastern province for its energy needs, but it was declining and needed to find a new supplier. They turned to the Sudanese government. Their need for oil was more important than the lives of the South Sudan later died for. The Comprehensive Peace Agreement was a national, it established 6 agreements between the South and the North. Its national multi-party election was held in 2009, actually occurred in April 2010. In January 2011, South Sudan will vote in a referendum as to whether to secede. English not ever was the official language of the South and was to be used in the schools. The Sharia laws only apply to Muslims. Half of all revenue from the southern oil fields will be distributed to the gross treasury each month. Between 2005 and 2007, $7 billion was transferred. All SA troops will withdraw from the south, and all SPL troops from the north. Joint Integrated Truth combination of SAF and SPLA was stationed throughout the south. Darfur was the westernmost part of the Sudan. Population consisted mostly of Arabs to the north, and many traditional tribes resided in the south. The rebellion that led to Darfur's involvement in the Second Sudanese Civil War in 1987 and 1989, putting the Darfur Arab tribes against the Fur. In 1987, the Sudanese rebels in Libya Islamic Legion was seeking to overthrow President Bar and move forces and set up base camps in Darfur with financial support, weapons, and training backed by Gaddafi, and taxes approved by Sade, then Prime Minister of Sudan. Boland attended the University of Khartoum. In 1973, he became the first non-Arab Sudanese president. Supporters supported him and hoped that Sudan was changing, but soon realized it not signal any shift of the underlying prejudice. In 1991, Boland returned to Darfur angry and abandoned the Islamic movement. Joined the SPLA and became a commander. He launched a military campaign against the government, but he was severely defeated. No one knows for sure, but it is believed he was executed. Although he was defeated, he was viewed as a hero, and his rebel led to the first major alliance between the South and Darfur regions. In 1995 to 1999, between the Darfur Arabs and the Muslim tribes. During the famine of the 1980s, the Muslim tribe blocked humanitarian aid to the Arab tribes. The government of Sudan deemed the Muslim as Arab adversaries and began arming the Arab tribes of Darfur. It exhibited animosity between the tribes. The Janjaweed began attacks on villages. In July 2001, the Fur and the Janjaweed pledged to resist the Arab supremacy movement. Long war entered space for peace agreements. But on May 18, 2003, a ceasefire dissolved after the Arab militia ambushed a 7-year-old Muslim on a road from Guinea to the village. He survived the attack and was later killed by the government. On March 25, 2003, rebels seized the town of Time, captured huge stocks of arms and equipment. Fear that they were losing their country, the government provided weapons to the Janjaweed, raped women and girls, took anything portable of value. Animals were wrestled or killed. Houses were torched, stragglers were shot or stabbed. Sometimes children were tossed into burning homes. In some cases, women were raped, were branded like cattle to permanently visible their humiliation. Other cases, women were abducted, repeatedly raped, and then released or killed. Villagers was mutilated and their bodies left exposed, tortured, decapitated. School children were chained together and burned, buried alive. In August 2004, 400 villages in Darfur was destroyed. 200,000 refugees crossed into eastern Chad. 1.2 million were displaced inside of Sudan. In 2005, UN International Commission of Inquiry, Darfur, also known as ICID, declared that the government of Sudan violated international rights and humanitarian laws. 544,000 people died, 304,000 from fires, and 240,000 from disease, dehydration, and hunger due to forced displacement. Refugees camps' mortality rates were 6 to 10 times higher than normal. It was caused starvation, dehydration, and disease. People were sent to camps where aid delivery system wasn't fully set up. The Darfur Peace Agreement, had 5 peace agreements between the Darfur region and the Sudanese government. It was created to disarm and dismobilize the Janjaweed militia by mid-October 2006. It placed restriction on the movements of the Popular Defense Forces and required their downsizing. 4,000 former combatants be integrated into the Sudanese armed forces. 1,000 be integrated into the police forces, and 3,000 be supported through the education and training program. The Government of National Unity, also known as GNU, will contribute to $300 million initial and then $200 million for the next 2 years to rebuild the region. Buffer zones were to be established around camps for internally displaced persons and humanitarian assistance corridors. The commission was also created, work directly with the UN to help people return to their homes. $30 million in compensation to victims of the conflict. This agreement did not halt the violence and the suffering. It wasn't unusual for boys to leave home for long periods of time to look after cattle for the school or for school, but would eventually return home. Their villages were mostly attacked at night. Some of these boys were away from home, and they did not return. They realized their families were gone. Others ran into the woods as their homes and families were being attacked. Began walking to refugee camps in Ethiopia. They wandered for months without mothers or fathers toward the promise of safety. In 1991, they were forced at gunpoint to leave the refugee camps in Ethiopia because communists had overthrown the government. They survived river crossing for more than a year back in Sade to Kenya. Many were drowned or were eaten by crocodiles or wild animals. Because they did not have water or food, they had to drink their own urine and eat mud and strange food, such as leaves and bark, in order to survive. Many died of hunger, disease, and animal attacks. Survivors relied on each other who would later help endure the months on water. Little ones became too weak or tired to continue. The older boys picked them up and carried them. They became parents to each other. They traveled anywhere between 700 and 1,000 miles. In 1992, 10,000 to 12,000 survived the journey, arrived at Kalum refugee camp in Kenya. Only half survived. In 2001, because of the conditions of the refugee camps, 4,000 lost boys were resettled in the United States. In this video you're about to watch is a story about a lost boy named Sade. He was one of 4,000 that was relocated to the United States.
This is the house I was born in. That's where I grew up. That's where I was born. And I used to play here with my cousin. That's my uncle's house. My grandfather was buried here.
Sudan is Africa's largest country. For 21 years, a civil war raged between northern and southern Sudan. Nearly 2 million people died. 4 million were displaced. During fierce government attacks in 1985, amid gunfire and bomb blasts, 17,007 Sudanese boys fled into the bush. They became known as the Lost Boys of Sudan. The Lost Boys trekked 1,800 miles across the desert, fending off lions and hyenas, eventually living in refugee camps, first in Ethiopia, then Kenya. During their journey, about 5,000 of the boys perished from hunger, thirst, disease, exploding bombs, or attacks by animals and soldiers. The 12,000 who survived ended up in the UN-sponsored refugee camp in Kakuma, Kenya. In 1996, Salva Duth was one of the first of 3,800 lost boys selected for resettlement in the United States.
When I came here, I was sponsored by Episcopal Church. This is how I get here. And when I came here, I didn't know anything. And when I get out from my apartment, walking about 5 blocks, I could not remember to go back to my place again, because everything looked the same.
Salva is now an American citizen. He lives in Rochester, New York, and is working on his bachelor's degree in international business.
And I have to make sure that I work hard enough to support myself and educate myself as much as I can. And I'm sure maybe a lot of you read about what is going on in Sudan and what happened. During the wartime, my dad took me to school. And when he took me there, the war broke out in the night. I depart, and we never see each other again. And I didn't know where my dad was for about 19 years. And when I heard about him, he was sick because of waterborne diseases, and he was in the clinic of UN. He walked close to 300 miles to go to that clinic, and he walked there many, many days to get there. I said I should go and see my dad before he passed away. And when I went there to that clinic, I saw my dad. He was very weak. And I walked to my dad. I said, "Hey, Dad, how are you?" And he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Salva Duth." And he was starting with emotion. And he sprayed the water on my body and said that it's a sign of the world coming back. He felt like I was dead and not coming out from the tomb. The doctor told him that he needed to start drinking clean water. If not, he might get sick again and get some waterborne disease again and might die. When I went back to US, I said I should do something to help my dad and other people who are in the same situation as well. And that's where I formed a non-profit organization called Water for Sudan. That's why I'm here today. And now he's drinking clean water, he's healthy. I was starting it because of him, but I find there was so much need for others. And if you help them, these people someday they may help others. And that's what really gives me energy, because it's helping the life of the people.
Although some children were able to go to other countries, many children were ever returning to other methods of survival. Children at risk were unruly for their homes and communities, internal displacement of refugees, orphans or separated from their families and parents and families, subject to sexual abuse and exploitation, victims of trauma as a result of being exposed to violence, deprived of education and recreation. They were deprived of basic needs such as shelter, food, and medical attention. The SLPA recruited them from refugee camps. Although many were forced to fight, many joined willingly because there were no future in the refugee camps. Many died on the battlefields or in the camps because of the bad conditions. Many children who survived were left with physical, psychological, such as PTSD, or injuries. Many things have changed since the beginning of the Second Sudanese War. In 2011, Sudan became two countries. On January 9, 2011, 98.83% of the people from the southern region voted to become its own country. Gaining independence as one of the most fragile and underdeveloped countries, 50% of its population lived below the poverty line. foreign revenues with Sudan. Only time will tell if this young nation will survive. After every genocide since the passing of the 1948 Declaration of Human Rights, the words "never again" has outcried among many nations, promising the people of the world genocides will never happen again on our planet, but it keeps happening. Since 1945, the end of World War II, 25 plus genocides have occurred, such as Sudan died for 2001 to now, the Dominican Republic of the Congo 1945, Somalia 1988,